In the modern day, when playing around with timelines, especially when it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's, many like to take all the information and lay it out on the table to put the pieces together, which I admit I often do as well. But I'm here to tell you that's one of the reasons why so many get this series wrong, and how we've overthought our ways into a majorly convoluted storyline just to try and fit everything together. I want to suggest the way I look at the series and how it makes a lot of pieces fit in place for me, as well as poke holes in many other popular theories going on at the moment. What is that theory? You see, Scott likes trilogies. That can't be understated. At the very least, he's confirmed that the first 3 games are meant to be seen as a trilogy. We have the Silver Eyes trilogy, and even with more modern news, we have the movies that have been planned for a long time to be a trilogy, which the beautiful man playing Afton has confirmed is the plan going forward. Thank you, Matthew. Why do I bring this up, though? Well, because when it comes to FNAF 4 through 6, everyone sees the series as just an add-on, just more events to fill up the timeline, but I don't think that's the truth at all. I think these 3 games actually act as their own trilogy, both mirroring the first 3 games while also telling its own narrative, or as I like to call it, the Afton era. In order for you to see it that way, let's dive into what the games were trying to say at the time and piece together at least some of the series together. FNAF 1 does very little on world building, giving us a few questions that we need to answer. What was the bite of 87? What happened to the missing kids? And who is Golden Freddy? It's expected that despite being a prequel, that the next game should answer those questions. Throughout our week, we hear about something going on in the background using a yellow suit, and that afterwards the toys start acting strange around adults. This event, mixed with Jeremy being switched to the day shift and the toys being scrapped afterwards, kind of point towards Jeremy being the victim of the bite of 87, attacked by one of the toys. Next, we have Save Them, which shows us a total of 5 kids, and no, we aren't going to count blood spills, we're just going to ignore those. And I think that this sort of suggests that this MCI is referring to the one in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, given this takes place during the summer, and Golden Freddy, after all, in FNAF 1 by typing 1987 spawns. Given he's not a toy animatronic, this leaves only this MCI to be a connection to this year. That answers all the questions from FNAF 1. But what about the new questions in this game? What are the shadow animatronics? What happened to the other missing children's incident? What the hell is Fredbear's, and what happens to the animatronics? FNAF 3 then picks up right after the closing of Five Nights at Freddy's 2 by showing us before FNAF 1 was opened, given the lack of the puppet, but the other suits being here, let alone the buttons on the costumes. This shows the old victims from the MCI mentioned in FNAF 2 get lured to the back, again by following the shadow version of Withered Golden Freddy, almost as if that was the suit used to lure these kids in the first place. They managed to get torn to shreds, releasing the souls from their suits. They all come together, scaring the murderer into the Spring Bonnie costume, only to get spring-locked. We see the spirits fade away, however, given future information, they have to still be alive, likely clinging onto his suit to survive. We pick up 30 years after FNAF 1 with the murderer waking up as a machine, a taste of his own medicine, dragged around to the sound of children. We see in the other set of minigames that Shadow Bonnie is associated with whoever possessed the FNAF 1 cast, showing the memories of the toy animatronics as well as memories of Fredbear's, suggesting 4 out of the 5 of these kids had to have been alive during FNAF 2, or I'm just overthinking that. We see the puppet return to help put these memories together in order to help these 5 kids rest, falling slower than the others, suggesting they had to stay behind. But the truth is, this event only managed to help one child move on, because something else was keeping the others tied to this world. It all ends with the fire meant to end it all, but the newspaper shows that our good old pal Springtrap is still around. This was meant to be the end of the trilogy. Everything was meant to disappear in that fire, but it didn't. This is the missing children era. Going forward in the series, we're going to assume at the time, and given the wording that FNAF 4 was originally intended to be an additional chapter, suggesting it was all a dream, but thankfully future games show that it changed course, becoming our first game in the Afton era. We have 2 parts, mini-games showing us earlier parts in the timeline, similar to what the newspapers did in FNAF 1, and main gameplay taking place shortly after FNAF 1 or during FNAF 1, and given the logbook showing Nightmare, Fredbear, whoever, we're going to assume that this is happening during the events of FNAF 1. The games also include phone calls in the background, suggesting whoever this is, they are connected to Mike Schmidt in some way. Also notice which games have the clock sound at the end, that being 1 through 3, which matches with the grandfather clock in the background, and mixed with the visions from FNAF 3, that implies we've been playing as Mike in every game so far, excluding our few moments with Jeremy. Mike faces off against the animatronics, which have similar behavior patterns as the characters from FNAF 1, mixed with their names, that being Nightmare animatronics, suggesting the gameplay is that, just nightmares. And before you start throwing your Didophobia propaganda at me, just give me a minute. We also notice the stuffed animals in the room, which we've only seen appear once in the series, excluding the cheat modes, that being the minigame kids, aka Crying Child. We see him in the room completely different than FNAF 4. He makes his way with his Fredbear plush back and forth from Fredbear's while trying to dodge his older brother and his friends. We meet a set of kids, one with orange pigtails and green eyes, another with a weird pose and thick makeup, and toys, another with a Spring Bonnie plushie but appears to be wearing him like a puppet, and a boy holding a balloon. He doesn't really matter here all that much. However, these kids will be important later. After all, very few characters in this series get to have traits instead of just being a generic green shirt kid. One of the days, the older brother takes the bullying too far, putting him up to Fredbear, causing a new bite, the bite of 83. The brother apologizes to him, and in his dying moments, the Fredbear plush tells him he'll put him back together. Many interpret the color change as showing another character taking control, but hold on to that. So obviously, if this kid dies in the minigames, he's who we play as, right? Well, not necessarily. After all, we see the stuffed animals spread throughout whatever house this is, suggesting someone took them from the kid's room and placed them here. So if this isn't the minigame kid, who is it? Well, what about the older brother, tormented by the guilt of what he did? Hence why Fredbear, or Aversion, was the character he chose to draw in the logbook, a reflection of what he caused. It's also the one event in the series that was not directly caused by the murderer before, and given it takes place in 1983, the earliest year in the timeline, it would suggest this was the event that caused everything to go bad. After all, nobody seems afraid of Fredbears for being kidnapped or murdered, and in absence of any characters at this location other than Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. And the date on the TV suggests that the characters from Fredbear and Friends premiere in 1983 as well, and animatronics are expensive. They would have to have some time to gain an audience, and opening Freddy's could have been used as some way to get the press off of them after the accident, and so that they don't have to close down. After all, why close due to an accident occurring? This shows the company's move to Freddy's, while Fredbear's manages to stay open, at least for a little while. If you remember, FNAF 2 mentioned Fredbear's, and how it was closed for years, as of 1987, but we also see an event take place in a small location with animatronics moving, which wasn't possible at Freddy's at that point, unless they were using a spring-lock suit. Anyway, moving back to the main point, Fredbear's closes rebrands the characters as golden variants of the animatronics, but everyone still knows who they are. One of the suits is used to lure 5 kids to the back, and you know the rest. We finally get more details about FNAF 4's gameplay in Sister Location, showing up as rooms when the digits 1983 are typed into the keypad of the secret room in Sister Location. We also see a Fredbear plush holding a walkie-talkie. We finally have an answer for the man behind the plushie. As for the color change, go and record your voice from the other side of a walkie-talkie. It sounds different. And another situation of we've only seen this once suggests this was the Crying Child's plushie, taken around the same time as the others, almost as if whatever this room's purpose started after his death. We also see gas canisters spread throughout the facility, suggesting whoever we play as in the gameplay was on this gas, seeing the nightmares. But what about the whole Mike Nightmare thing? Well, we'll have to take a look at the main story of this game, that being the technician we play as, Michael Afton. Thank you, hand unit. We find out he was sent down there by his father, who appears to be Springtrap, to put his sister back together. Thanks to lines throughout the game and minigames, we find out this sister of his was the one possessing Baby. Given he has achieved his goal, and the only real big event during this game was them all combining, which wasn't caused by Michael, and the only hand he had in this was getting scooped and then helping them get set free, which he proceeds to say after suggesting letting her free was also not putting her back together. What's more likely is that they used what was left of the remnant inside of the scooper on Michael, and once they climbed inside, all of the pieces were finally back together, now whole. They all choose to split from Michael and even kick Baby to the curb, but one of the souls must have held on to Michael because he can't die. This also explains the nightmares, as the spirits in the fun times were the victims of these experiments, and even potentially the kids from before. Similar to the shadows, Nightmare is created of these events, as it's assumed he's some sort of shadow animatronic, and fits with my theory from earlier. It ends with Michael claiming to come look for his father and then showing Springtrap rise from the ashes. But why? William is most likely still alive at the point of sister location, given someone has to be paying those technicians or hiring Michael in the first place. The scene appearing here has to mean something, and given the context of a man now rotten and decaying, hiding in the shadows and looking for his father, as well as showing Afton after the events of 3, read to at least me that those 3 original games were showing us Michael looking for his father. This leaves us with the only question of what happened to everybody after that fire. We pick back up with FNAF 6, bringing all the pieces together, fixing themselves with scrap. Afton, Baby, Ennard, now called Molten Freddy, all make their way to what's assumed to have been the original Fredbears, now rebranded as the last Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The puppet also makes its way to the location, hiding in a suit laying in the back, later to be revealed as the Lefty system programmed to keep the puppet inside. Henry tried his best to have everything here, using all the scraps from the old animatronics to build the rock stars, whether they were possessed or not. He even brought his oldest animatronics, the mediocre Melodies, and managed to grab Funtime Chica in case she was possessed as well. I want to take a minute to add a point in that Michael was likely the one helping put the pieces together in FNAF 3, whether it worked or not, and given Carlton in the books was only able to help him once having their remnant shoved into him, mixed with the logbook having both Golden Freddy spirits speak, suggest Michael was being used as a host for the Save Them victims and his brother. This might even explain how he was able to see his brother's memories represented by the minigames. With this, we have one MCI in Michael and the other in Afton. Henry might have assumed those souls were set free in the FNAF 3 fire, hence why all of those shells were brought together to burn, in an attempt to set them free. A line many like to bring up is how Michael wasn't the original intended guard for FNAF 6, and I think this is actually easy to answer, as we're told a way out was planned, suggesting anyone could have gotten the job, and that Henry likely didn't think Michael was alive. All Henry wanted was to call them all back, the children and the rest of the souls, in one place. He set the place ablaze, finishing what he had accidentally started all those years ago. After all, Henry and Michael both could have been blamed for the crying child's death, an accident that caused all of this to happen, and together they brought everything to an end. The perfect ending to the series. Or it would be, if it wasn't for one person. Something was keeping them all alive, stuck in a never-ending nightmare likely forced upon Afton, the one that stopped Happiest Day from happening, the vengeful spirit. Golden Freddy. Looking at the series this way makes the story fit nicer, with all the pieces meaning something, rather than these games being about only the missing children. As for the later trilogy, we'll have to talk about that in another video, some other time. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to let me know by liking and consider subscribing for more horrible FNAF theories like this in the future. I need a break. I will see you next week. Matane.